Hello and welcome back to Warcraft Daily for today, the 30th of January 2014. So in today's news we have three different things, and then I'm going to round it off with some questions from my Q&A list. Well, in fact the last two, and the reason that's just because not really a great deal of news. It's funny, when there's no patch cycle, there really isn't as much to make a show with. Anyway, so first of all, the store. Right, there's a new button on the login screen on the PTR. I was going to say something about it yesterday, but honestly I didn't really think much of it. Turns out there's actually been a lot of naysaying on various forums. I've seen loads of threads in MMO Champion and the official WoW forum. But, yeah, a lot of naysaying. Anyway, a guy called Tapesylum, something like that. He's one of the European community managers. He basically went to the forums and said that they get many players who don't want to use the shop. And, currently at Blizzard they feel that the button itself is not too intrusive and that it's not really going to cause a problem for those players. So yeah, fair enough. Then he also said that many interface add-ons actually hide the micro menu by default. Now the micro menu is just a little block of buttons in which the store is usually found. And if that's usually hidden by default, then Blizzard's logic is, well, people aren't going to see the store. And if they're not going to see the store, they're not going to buy things from the store. And I guess that kind of makes sense. Really, I don't see this being a major problem. I guess that it can perhaps feel a little bit like they are trying to constantly sell you stuff, and I guess that could just end up becoming a little bit annoying for some people. Still though, it's not like your mouse is being pulled towards the button, so it is still optional, and it's not like it's like there's a 3-step process to logging into World of Warcraft, and one of those steps involves the full open store, like being in your face. Like, it would be ridiculous if on the bottom left of your login screen you just saw this like little turnstile thingy with a mount on it and a little price tag. It's not like they're doing that, I guess. Still, it's interesting though how subscription fee MMOs are going. When we look at Elder Scrolls Online and WildStar, they both are going to have a full sub fee, but also microtransactions. I think WildStar is probably going to be the most consumer friendly of between it and ESO, because you can also actually buy in-game time for currency, which I think is really quite interesting. But still, they're both going to have microtransactions one way or another, so it is, I guess, becoming the norm. Personally, though, I still lean on the side of cosmetic things are fine, but gameplay things should just absolutely not be for sale. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting, this whole store debate. I guess one thing that you could slightly infer is that the reason the store is in the game is so that people discover the store and then make a purchase, in terms of it just being more of a off-the-cuff, spur-of-the-moment thing. Someone who actually sees one of these mounts on Blizzard social media or YouTube or something is going to decide, well, I want to buy that, so they're going to go into the game and they're going to find the store. This change in putting the store really up in your face isn't going to be of use to the people who just want to find the store and buy a mount. It's going to be interesting for the people who say, just see this store button and think, huh, that's new. Then they click on it and they see a bunch of mounts and think, oh shit, for the low price of $350 I can get all these mounts of pets. And then they buy them. Blizzard are happy. We can buy Celestian some cake. Yeah, so there's that. I don't know, I don't think it's perhaps as giant an issue as some people make it out to be with the actual UI thing, though I do agree that a UI that's really egregious with the store stuff could be definitely a bit of a problem. They aren't really at that stage yet, though, so I think it's kind of okay. Anyway, next, PvP. There's a new toggle. This is, well, it's maybe not 100% interesting for the PvP players, but for the PvE players, this is definitely quite good. So this is some news, and it comes from Bashiok, and he said in the US forums that they may be upgrading the PvP toggle. Basically, what they want is just a flat PvP on or PvP off toggle, which means that a player could, under no circumstances, be flagged for PvP based on their actions. That's like their in-game actions. This would get rid of some of the tricks that players can use to accidentally flag someone else, so if there's some tricks going around where people just like use AoEs and various other kind of things to trick people into being flagged, and then once that person is flagged as PvP, they can be griefed or something like that. Now the way this will work is that if someone is flagged to opt out of PvP, then the flag, any heals on that flagged player would fail. I have to assume that's only in a PvP circumstance. Like, of course, if a healer is just going around the world and sees you nearly dying to a monster, they probably could still heal you back up. It also prevents things like misclicks and AoEs from flagging you, and also will prevent you from being coalesced into a PvP realm. Overall, this sounds pretty good, actually. I know there's some people who've said that it's the world of Warcraft, so there should be at least some way of doing PvP. Honestly, I'm happy enough for it to be an opt-in thing. I get the charm of just leveling up through a zone and having to deal with the other faction, but when I think of something like the Timeless Isle, or one of those really condensed places, maybe like say Hyjal was in Cataclysm, I don't know, like, to me that just sounds like so many players of two different factions in the same area, that it's just going to be, like, for the faction that is smaller on a server, it's just going to be crazy. So yeah, I mean, the World PvP does have its charms in that way, but in terms of the people in a PvE server, I think it's totally cool that they're able to opt out. I don't know, like, that Tauren that I've been leveling up on that PvP server, you've probably seen it in my Q&A videos. If that Tauren ever does get high level, I guess I'll have a bit of an experience to see what World PvP is like, just on a PvP realm. But, I don't know, like, I'm convinced that it can be really fun, and there can be some really nice, memorable, emergent gameplay. I'm just not sure if the inconvenience will start to get annoying. There's also the fact that if someone is rolling around in a spec that's not really a PvP one, like maybe they're a tank or they just have their healer spec, it can be a bit annoying if you're tricked into being flagged or that kind of thing. Overall, this isn't a giant issue. And actually, that whole tricking people into flagging them for griefing them, I'm not going to say that I grief people, but a good few years ago, me and my friends, when we were at this land center, would do raids on the Crossroads and Razor Hill and places like that. And we just basically go there and we try to trick as many people into flagging themselves for PvP as we could, and just we'd end up having these big giant fights, and it was really fun. Until, of course, half of Orgrimmar barreled down the road and chopped us to pieces, which would have invariably, it would just happen every time. Ah well, so there's that. Now let's move on to the final bit of news today, which is tweets. The first one is from Celestian, and he said that Vengeance is being changed up a bit. In 6.0, Vengeance will no longer provide any offensive value, however it will still remain in a defensive capacity, and perhaps a threat one, but only if they find that it's needed for threat. Ideally, it will not be. I don't really play a tank that much as a main, so I don't know, Tax, you sort of think about that one. I guess there's a bit of an argument that perhaps it would make tanking less fun because you won't be doing as much damage because you don't have that whole your DPS ramping up with Vengeance thing. But I think that the way Vengeance played out was often to the detriment of how you should properly tank, where taking more damage as long as your healers could deal with it meant more DPS for the raid, and I don't think that really made sense. It was a bit of a... I think they were at odds, I guess, the whole element of being a good tank that reduces the damage they take, and then doing high damage. They were completely at odds with the Vengeance system, so this is probably going to be a good change on the whole. And I think for the hardcore tanks who are really into their tanking and being efficient and all that, they probably will appreciate this change, I guess. But if you are one of those hardcore tanks, let me know what you think. Anyway, so next, Chris Robertson, who is the big art guy over there, said that the orc female is actually giving them a little bit of bother, and that the one in the trailer was a early model. As it turns out, her mouth looks a bit like Homer Simpson's at the minute, so they're still iterating on face and body textures. Fair enough, I don't think Homer Simpson female orcs would be good for anyone. Well, I mean, it'd be kind of funny, but yeah. Anyway, so finally, he said that he's actually aware that there are a lot of problems with... Well, there's problems with a lot of people in regards to Worgen females. They're not too popular, and they do have some annoying issues with their model. Basically, some elements of the model don't look right. When they turn around, it doesn't look right. Their mouth animations, there's one point where their mouth opens too wide for a certain thing, and there's just various little niggly issues that are kind of annoying. He said there's no ETA, but it is in the radar. Honestly, I never really tried a Worgen female, but when I went searching the internet for examples of some of the issues, oh no, they looked really bad. I mean, it was kind of surprising, actually. You know what, it's weird, I don't like Worgen models, actually. Initially I thought, oh yeah, this is really cool, they look kind of bestial, but as time went on, they just have so many issues with clipping, and really wonky looking animations, and then of course the armor on them, I think, unless the armor is cloth, I think the armor just often looks awful on a Worgen. Especially if it's like plate or something that's supposed to be a little bit tighter to the model. It's okay with like cloth or something that kind of drapes a little bit more. I actually think that a Worgen Warlock looks pretty cool. But as for the rest of them, I don't know, I'm just not sold on the whole Worgen idea. And it would be nice to see those models upgraded. Especially since at the launch of Warlords, if Worgen are not done, which I'm pretty sure that Worgen and Goblin won't be. It's not 100% confirmed, but they may or may not be done for the launch of Warlords. Though probably not. Now, if they're not done, what's going to happen is you'll have this really crappy Worgen model in comparison to this amazing human model when you switch forms. That's a bit strange, so I'm not really too sure how that's all going to play out. Anyway, let's jump over to some questions. The first one is about Blood Elves. This comes from Naldok the Legend, who says, "You seem to know Can I talk? You seem to know a lot about the lore, so can you explain the difference between the Blood Elves and the High Elves, beside the name and faction alliances, allegiances? Love your lore-based stuff, and greetings from Slovenia." I've been to Slovenia. It was back when they had the Toller. I was skiing, and we stayed at Lake Bled. It's a really beautiful country. We had I still remember at the hotel, this, like, dish we got, and just big fucking sausage. I mean, it was just a giant sausage, and it was hilarious, but, yeah. Woohoo, Europe. Woohoo, skiing. It's fun. Blood Elves. Yeah, let's get back on topic. So, as I'm sure all of us know, we have the Highborn, who are exiled because of all their magic stuff. The Highborn then were just called themselves the High Elves, and they lived in Kel'Thas. And honestly, for the vast majority of the time, they were High Elves. In Warcraft 3, they were High Elves. And Kel'Thas, Sunstrider, was a High Elf in Warcraft 3 until they decided to rename. And when they decided to rename, it was basically in honor of all the people who had died in the Third War. So then you have this race called the Blood Elves because they've been renamed by Kel'Thas. Now, one of the teachings, very soon later, Kel'Thas went to Outland and he learnt this technique of sucking the mana out of living beings. And he came back and he said, right, this is how we're going to feed our mana addiction now that the Sunwell's all borked up because of Arthas. But that's not really very ethical because it involved those animals dying, probably excruciatingly painfully. So a bunch of the High Elves said, the people there said, no, we ain't having this. I think it was about 10% of them. They left, they kept their name as the High Elves, and that's why you now have the High Elves and the Blood Elves. The High Elves just kind of gravitated back to the Alliance because historically High Elves and the Alliance were kind of buddies. So that's really it. The Blood Elves gravitated to the Horde because of Sylvanas and a bunch of sort of pressure that came in there, and also the fact that she lent some military aid to them. If you want a bit of a longer talk on this, then just look at my lore videos for Lor'themar. That should explain it. So yeah, there's that. Then another question, just to get this one out of the way, it is from Declan Eagle, who says, quick question about the new Warlords gear. It has been said that we're now only getting armor types dropping, so for example, a leather head or a plate chest. And these will change depending on what spec you are, to make sure that everyone of every spec type is happy. But what happens when a leatherhead drops, and then for every druid, rogue, and monk in the team just kind of wants one? He says he thinks it will be chaotic for large teams to get good or optimal loot and that kind of thing. Okay, so instead of, currently, let's just take plate heads, right? You could drop a plate intellect head or a plate strength head. Now it's just going to be a plate head. What this means is, okay, there will probably be more competition per item, but there will be more loot drops. And that will fit in for more people. So maybe, let's just say there's three kinds of leatherhead. Well, now there's only one kind, but it'll drop 3 times as much since they don't have to have 3 different versions. What this should do, actually, is make loot tables a lot more easier and a lot more readable. So, yeah, I mean, I can see how you think it would be a bit confusing, but honestly, I think that it will be okay. Now, the only time where there could be a bit of an issue is with tertiary stats and secondary stats. You could have 2 of the same item drop, and one of them is far better than the other, so I think that's just going to be like in today's game where a Warforged weapon drops and you need to decide who gets it. Usually EPGP or a similar loot system will take care of that, though. Actually, that's a good question. How is EPGP or a system like that going to deal with tertiary stats, Warforged, and all those different things? Interesting. But, yeah, I guess it could be a little bit more chaotic, but it will also be more readable and understandable and easy. You will be disenchanting less things. So overall, I think it's probably a change for the better, and we'll just need to see exactly how it plays out with their implementation and then how boss loot tables are drawn up for the expansion. Anyway, that is it for today's video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any responses or questions or anything, please leave them down in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff, because it really does help out the channel. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.